All right. Sounds like a plan. Um, well, so just to start, so did everybody get the chance to read through about the Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts?
I'm actually reading it right now. It's been a robust day for me.
I bet. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess could somebody just give us kind of a quick rundown of what their little situation was at the airport?
So, Sanchez was working and he was on the phone with his daughter telling her that she should be doing her homework so they can hang out that night. So it was not an emergency call. And during that time, it was a short, few minutes on the phone. And during that time, a person went right through security, it sounded like. And that was his job to not let that happen. And so it's a pretty big deal. And luckily for him, it was just like an international traveler trying to make their flight. So no harm done. But if it was something, it could have been a really bad situation. And so that's kind of what happened. And they're trying to decide how to discipline him.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys did, but I kind of feel like I somewhat had a hard time really understanding where he was standing and what he was doing and how him being on the phone made somebody get all the way through security, because from their diagrams there's like 15 people there. So I don't know. Did any of you pick up on that pretty well? Could you explain that to me and to the group?
I don't think it was very clear. But I mean, there's other people doing his job. Does it sound like he, was just doing security or whatever, like the low level of security? Well, not low level, but it's called a, I think he was just a TSO, right? Because he didn't want to do upper management ones like LTSO or TSO.
Right.
So,
Uh-huh.
so yeah, I mean, he shouldn't have been on his phone, but I think someone else could have caught it too. So I had a hard time understanding why he had his phone in the first. If it wasn't allowed, which it says in the little footnotes that they're not allowed to be on their phone unless they it's emergency and after they notify a supervisor. But for him to he sounds like a really dedicated guy, so I didn't really understand why he felt like he could be on his phone if he was just this super dedicated good worker,
Right. Yeah. No, I kind of had gathered the same thing too. I mean, fortunately, like you said, it didn't really turn into much of a situation, but yeah. So it says this time, however, he had been on his cell phone with his daughter while at his post monitoring an exit corridor. So down on the graph on Exhibit 4. Okay, so he was like the lone guy. Okay, so I see where that works, where he could be by himself.
Which on the graph?
On this picture?
Exhibit 4, he would be the one on the far left, right, where the arrow goes down to exit lane.
Yeah, the exit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But to me, that's headed the opposite direction. So I was confused. Because isn't all the passengers and the terminals and stuff headed the other way?
Yeah, but I've seen this at the airport before, so they keep
So
open.
is he headed to baggage claim?
No, they keep this if this is what I think it is, they keep this little area open and pilots and people that are just walking out and not going to the planes go this way. Are they saying that the woman rushed him and went in?
Oh,
Supposed to be
I,
out?
I see what you mean. So yeah, normally all his traffic is coming out, but since he was on his phone, he wasn't looking. The guy went through his lane rather than going through any security at all.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, okay. Yeah, that does make a little more sense. So, just reading through this then, I'm supposed to ask, have any of you worked as a TSA agent before at an airport?
No.
No?
No.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I haven't either. So I guess then imagine if that was your job, what kind of things do you think you would like or dislike about the job?
I think I'd have a sense of pride about, making a safe environment and protecting people.
Mhm.
I think I would dislike how frustrated people would become with me.
Yeah.
Situation.
Because it seems like it's fairly rigid, you can't really just be a super nice, go easy guy, I feel like, at least. I mean, you can interact with people, but if there's not much leniency on what's allowed and what isn't, so. Okay. So just to kind of get down to the nitty gritty, what do you guys think O'Reilly should do about Sanchez? And explain your reasoning of why you think the way you do.
I think that they shouldn't fire him, but they should punish the discipline without punishment and give him that day leave. Because to me, it sounded like this was his first time that something like this happened. So I would do that.
So I thought I read that it was his second time and he had to be pre-certified or recertified in the past. And that I forget her name, O'Reilly had felt like that was just a one-off incident. And so she had continued to think that he was overall strong and he just had that one isolated incident, but this would make two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's correct. It is his second offense. This one definitely was more serious, but this kind of is his second offense. He had to do some retraining earlier. But he's, like I said, he's been on board for a long time with the company. And so, when you work there for 13 or 14 years, you're going to have small things, I think. But this one, they definitely mentioned that this one was a lot bigger than the last one. So, Sarah, what's your thoughts? Would you go straight to firing since he held up airports all across the country and potentially could have had a terrorist attack on his head, or what?
Oh, because I keep going back and forth. Because when I was reading the situation, it didn't sound like a huge deal, but then I think actually it really was, because it could have been someone that, he's lucky it wasn't someone who was trying to hurt somebody else. So,
Yeah.
I keep going back and forth. I really do. I kept going back to the cell phone. Like, why did he even have it in the first place? And when I was reading through it, I was like, shouldn't there be a policy on that? But then I read that second article saying, like, you can't keep making policies based on, like, the bad behavior of other employees. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm torn. I'm torn between on what to do. I definitely think that 1 day paid leave would be a good idea. Whether that be so O'Reilly has more time to think about it, make a decision. But yeah.
Would you jump to a demotion at all, or would you keep him where he's at? I mean, I guess he kind of is in like the lowest
I thought he
level
was
of employment.
I don't think there is a demotion, is there? Because I think he, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I assume that's why they had us read that article along with kind of the different way of looking at discipline. Because I think this is a really prime situation in my head of serious, not misbehavior, but, lack of uniformity and kind of the whole goal of having him there. But it's not like he's lazy. It's not like he doesn't want to be there. It's not like this is just a stepping stone for him. Like he's planted his feet here. He's been here for a long time. He enjoys the job. He's turned down promotions within the company for it. And so I definitely lean more towards kind of a disciplinary route outside of firing him, but maybe that's just me.
I would separate him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, the liability involved in allowing him to have a third incident is, because we would be setting him up. The next time would be his third incident, and that would be public if anything ever happened. So not only, has he made a couple of mistakes, the cell phone was pretty willful. I mean, he had to make a decision to pull out his cell phone and make a personal call while on duty. I know he says he's committed, but not entirely.
Yeah. If he stays, what do you think the other TSLs will think?
I think they
I
would
think,
get
yes. I think they would be grateful. It sounds like he gets along with everybody. I think most of them would probably feel like that was a close call. We're glad he's still around. If this isn't something that would get him fired, what would, I guess? That's where I get stuck. That's why I decided to separate. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just prolonging, waiting for the next more serious incident. Yeah. So obviously Sanchez, his negligence result. I think it said there was a 45-minute closure of just his terminal, and then that once all those planes get delayed, passengers who were planning to barely catch theirs by 40 minutes, now they miss their next planes, and then they could potentially miss their third plane, and that's probably pretty embarrassing for the airport. Does the severity of the consequence make a difference in the result of the same? Like, for example, if you punish him since it's a pretty severe mistake, do you feel like the punishment has to reciprocate in severity?
Yes. I think to a certain extent, yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in his situation, the severity doesn't, for me, in his situation, the severity doesn't really mean anything. It's as much that he let somebody through and that this is the second time that it's happened. Whether they just had an empty blue bag that had nothing in it, or whether, they had a machete, he made the same mistake. In this case, I don't think it does. I think in other cases of disciplinary action, I think that we definitely want to look at how serious it is and tie that. There's so many different stages with sexual harassment, for instance. Like there's something like asking someone repeatedly, which is maybe a little bit more benign, versus grabbing somebody.
Right. Entirely his fault?
Yes.
Seems like he was pretty isolated, huh? Do you think there's anything that could prevent this in the future? Do you think it's just cell phone use? Is that kind of the only thing?
Well, I have a question. So he was by himself, right?
It seems that way, yeah.
Did it say that there should have been like a supervisor in his area?
I mean,
Like an LTSO?
I think they're just in charge of a group. Like, I think the LTSO is in charge for all the LSOs within terminals. But I think that's it. It's just kind of, I don't know if they necessarily watch over each other, especially where he was positioned. But it seems, I mean, he does have a supervisor, but I don't think she like watches over and supervises what he does in particular. But so, sorry, go ahead. Was someone saying something?
Yeah. So it says in here that the night before he got off at like 8 p.m. And then that day his shift started at 3 a.m. And so if he I think that's an important thing to bring up because I mean, he didn't have much time to talk to his daughter that night or he didn't,
Right.
get a lot of sleep. So I mean, it could have been say like he wasn't talking on his cell phone, but he had like nodded off or something. He had fallen asleep, then it'd be a whole different scenario.
Right.
It would be more like, okay, the company shouldn't be scheduling their employees, these shifts or whatever. So, I mean, that's something that we could maybe consider, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good. And it also mentioned that they use short shifts and more shifts in the week so that people stay like engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be better to give them a break, like a longer day and a break. That way he knows, okay, I need to call my daughter, but I have a break in 35 minutes, so I can just call her then.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good catch that you saw that.
Oh, and another thing, so we know that he was isolated where he was at, and we know that he has to get permission from his supervisor, but to do that, he would have to leave his station to go get permission. So if
Maybe
it was an emergency and he couldn't leave his post, but he needed to talk to his supervisor, then what do you do in that situation,
Right. And I can't tell from that graph if they're actually close to each other. It looks like they might not be way far from each other, but far enough, probably. At an airport as big as one they're at.
Do they have walkie-talkies though?
Probably.
So obviously like calling his daughter was kind of like a casual thing for him. I'm sure it was just like, oh, let me just pull out my phone and call my daughter. So I don't know where I was going with that. I just like he kept talking about how this is national security, like, even international security, but then he makes like a mistake like that. So it's just it seems strange to me.
Yeah. So for this next section, they're really getting into role plays apparently because they would like us to do a short 15, just a few minute role play of the next discussion between O'Reilly and Sanchez. So do we have anybody who would like to volunteer for that?
Sure.
I'll go with you. I'll be the other part. I can be Sanchez if you want to be O'Reilly.
Okay.
It says, and then ask the other teammates to observe. It says, tell the person acting as O'Reilly that this is the moment when Sanchez is showing up for work the next day. She needs to tell him what her decision is and then have them do the role play. Give them about 5 minutes. So,
Okay.
so
Alright.
yeah, basically that happened at the very end of last. You guys basically told me to go home at the end because my shift was almost over anyways. I went home feeling pretty sick just because of what happened. So I'm showing up the next morning, basically, is the situation.
And your order is ready at the holiday table.
All right. I forgot Sanchez's first name.
Me too. Ludo.
Ludo. Hi, Ludo. Hey, I know that yesterday was really difficult and it was really challenging. And I need to let you know that at this point, we've made the decision to move forward with the separation. And the reason for that is because you've had a previous security violation, you were recertified, and there was a second violation. And in order to protect the safety of the others that work and travel here, we have to take this step. I'm sorry, I wish you all the best, but I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
So if you don't mind me asking, and obviously, like I respect your decision and I recognize the severity of it, but at the same time,
For your holiday
Did-
order.
decision, who was in the group that you made the decision with?
Well, I made the primary decision. I reviewed the footage of what happened from the security cameras. I talked to a few of the other team members that worked in the vicinity, and we spoke with you yesterday, and I feel like I received a pretty clear perspective on what happened. There wasn't an emergency. It was an intentional act to make a phone call. You know, at this point, there's really nothing that I can do outside of move forward with the separation.
I guess my question would be, where there wasn't anything, obviously it was a situation that had potential to be damaging, but it didn't end up being damaging, thank goodness. And my last mistake was years ago, and you know, it wasn't something I deliberately was trying to do. I wasn't malicious in my acts at all. What do you feel like it would take for me to get another chance?
Well, I would need to discuss our policy. I think that in general, there would need to be at least a 6-month separation prior to being reconsidered for a position. But I would say, Sanchez, that I'd like to see you take more ownership for this. You did make a deliberate choice. While it wasn't malicious, you did make a choice to remove your attention from your post, and that caused a security breach. You made a choice to make a phone call. You deliberately stepped away from your duties, shifted your attention, and I mean, that piece is yours to own. And while I regret it, I regret that I won't be working with you in the future. You know, this is an appropriate way to resolve this issue.
Well, should we stop there? I feel like that was pretty good. Marilyn, good work, by the way. There wasn't much rebuttal I could have given on that, I feel like.
I do that more than I would like to, actually, so.
How often do you guys let people go? Do you feel like that's not too personal of a question?
I mean, as infrequently as possible, but I would say probably once every 5 or 6 months.
Really?
Yeah. Usually it's attendance, which is really straightforward. I mean, there's a very clear attendance policy. And people get, you know, a counsel, an unsat, a final, and there's a ton of ways to avoid receiving documentation for attendance by bringing something from the doctor. So those are really easy because they're straightforward. It's the ones that are less straightforward that are really hard.
Right.
Like, that's this problem.
Right. Well, you were good at it, so.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, right?
Lisa and Sarah, what were you guys' thoughts on that little discussion? Do you feel like after going through that, do you feel like it actually is the best decision to let him go?
I do actually. Yeah. I mean, just thinking out, the reason I want to keep him on is because, he's doing this job because he loves it. He has a passion for it. And, he's a good worker and he's just a good worker. But the reality of it is this is his second offense. And it was a very careless act that resulted in a huge security breach. And I liked what I don't know who said it, but they said that if there was a third time and it was his fault and it was something that was actually serious, it would look really bad on them, like the airport, for keeping him around for so long after having two offenses, especially this past one, which was a serious one. And so I think for I don't know if there's liability issues or whatever, but for liability reasons, I would let him go. And I like the idea of telling him, 6 months, maybe, and maybe we'll rehire you, maybe,
Right.
but yeah.
Lisa, what do you think?
I'm not sure if I would fire him. He might need to be fired, but I don't know. Since it has been years since his other offense, then I would have still. Do we know what his offense was the last time?
I don't know. I've been trying to find it. I feel like I can't find it.
Was it similar or not similar? Because that would help decide if he really needed fired or if he just needs trained again. But I don't think he really needs fired right away. I would
So
I would have given him one more chance.
it says right above this paragraph that says Ludo Sanchez, it says that Sanchez embodied the values that O'Reilly espoused. He was invaluable at checkpoints. She knew he had been recertified 2 years ago due to poor performance on screening audits, but she had always considered that an isolated incident on an otherwise strong record. The recertification process entailed attending extra training sessions and succeeding on an ability test. So basically, just during my little company audits, they decided that I wasn't good enough at those yet. So it wasn't a security issue last time. It was just I don't you really know what you're doing quite yet. We just want to make sure, give you a little bit of extra training. So this is really my first security issue. But so good thoughts. Marilyn, was there anything that was especially difficult for you to say in that conversation?
I mean, I think I just felt really bad for Sanchez, on a personal level, because I know that he's a single father and that his intentions were really good, that he just wanted to do some parenting and he was pretty tied up. I think to Sarah's point, I would feel conflicted about his scheduling. Like here at our store, we have a policy that you can't, we call it a clopen, when you schedule someone to close one night and open the next morning without that person's permission. Because it really can affect somebody's performance. It's hard to do a good job when you're exhausted. So I think I would have felt conflicted about those things. Like at what level did we contribute by scheduling him a really cruddy shift? I would have felt bad for him on a personal level. And I didn't really have an answer for him about whether he could come back. Like here, there are certain violations that are ineligible for rehire. And so it's marked right on the separation form. But other violations aren't, and a person could reapply within 6 months. I think I would have wanted to know what his options were before I spoke with him.
Right. What do you feel like in a job like the one that we're talking about, where, I mean, it is somewhat of a responsibility job, but I mean, the pay's between 25 and 35. You know, so it's not like there's a ton of training required, probably. Not more than maybe a month of learning how to do it. What are some good policies, do you feel like, or what would be commonplace of, if I was let go, could I come back? Are there less risky places to put me that, and then kind of have a probation period? You know, what are the full range of options? Obviously firing, but what are the options outside of that?
Yeah, I feel like if I were O'Reilly, I would have wanted to have a really honest conversation with my supervisor about what the expectations were, because it, you know, sure, it's her job to make the decision, but I think she also felt like she couldn't approach her leadership to ask what their expectation was. Because if their expectation is that he's separated, then that's probably like 90% like where she's going to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if she were able to have an open conversation about what's happened in other situations that might be similar, to see what kind of precedents there might be, then I think she would have more of a view of the full range of options. But it doesn't sound like she has a comfortable relationship. She's really concerned about what her boss said, and his words kept resonating to her, that it's not the mistake, but how the mistake is dealt with.
Right. And that's, I think, the hardest part about this is that it's not a position that's probably that hard to replace. And so, although he brings a good environment to him, he probably doesn't, it's not like he's an irreplaceable employee, you know?
Right.
So from the boss perspective, it's probably a very clear decision. Yeah, let him go. But once you consider like the human issue, you know, I think that kind of turns into a different story.
He could work
So
at
after all this, sorry, go ahead.
he could work at Whole Foods Market.
Hey, there you go.
There's no national security at risk, and we start everyone at $15 an hour.
Nice. What
So-
location are you at, Marilyn?
Indianapolis.
Okay. And Lisa, where do you live? I don't know if I remember where you live.
Logan, Utah.
Okay, gotcha. And then you're out in Virginia, right, Sarah? Was that a yes?
Yes. Can you hear
Oh.
me when I talk?
No, yeah, I didn't see a
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that. So after all this discussion, is there anybody, I kind of want to hear a vote from everybody. Fire, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. I think Maryland's at the chopping block. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
Sarah, where do you stand?
I think he should be fired.
Lisa?
I still wouldn't fire him.
A little more mercy coming from Lisa, huh? And why is that, do you feel like?
Well, I don't know if it was his fault alone, because we know he was on the phone, so we know that part was his fault. But to me, I would think that this guy would have ran past somebody before he even got there to run through security. So I would think other people weren't like watching when he first entered the airport, because we only know about the security area. So I don't know.
Right. I think my only thoughts of why I wouldn't fire him, I think, would be that Sanchez being retrained would be a better employee than probably what you would pick up anywhere else. That's my only thoughts to it, is that if you gave him a little bit of retraining and kind of a serious enough consequence, I think he's more valuable on your team than somebody that you'd find up just by opening up for interviews, I would think. But I think you also have the right to, after giving him a paid day off, to have him really think about it, and you give a consequence. I think you still do have a few weeks to really think that you could kind of get rid of him again, but maybe that's just me. Okay, so now that you've all put in your vote, I need to tell you, the group, that Sanchez got a warning but was not fired. However, 2 months later, he caused another serious breach. So now ask, so I think it's pretty obvious now you fire him, but what does this teach you about discipline, do you feel like, knowing that that was the situation?
I don't know. I still feel like I just don't always get discipline, you know? I mean, like, even if some people would have responded differently, possibly, than Sanchez did,
Mm-hmm.
or would have taken it more seriously. Maybe the warning needed to be more severe. But I don't know. It's just different things motivate people differently.
Yeah.
And it can be confusing. You know, some people, when they receive like a serious warning or like a final written warning, they really pull themselves up by their bootstraps and like want to prove like that they can do it. And I've seen people make really, it doesn't happen a lot, but I've seen people make like total 180-degree turnarounds in that circumstance. And other people, you know, they don't take any ownership of it. They blame the person that is holding them accountable, and it doesn't get better.
Right. Sarah, Lisa, you guys have any thoughts on that? What do you feel like that teaches about discipline, that within 2 months he had another serious breach? What do you feel like that teaches about discipline?
In that outcome, I thought that if he did get a second chance, that he would, do better. And just because he does sound like a really good employee and people like him and stuff, but sounded like he just got really sloppy and lazy in his job, and he forgot his purpose. So.
I would think like disciplining him, like he would see that, okay, we do want to keep you, but now, like this next time, the third time, he obviously didn't want to change. And the punishment, because I would think that when this time when he didn't get fired, by disciplining him, he would have wanted to change and do better, but then after a while, it still didn't work out.
Right.
So he wasn't really trying to do better after, sounds like.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that's hard, is you can't have your retraining take forever. You know, you eventually have to finish up. And so it can pretty easily become dull. You know, after, okay, well, I did like 6 hours of retraining. Now it's all the same. You know, it's just back to normal. But in all reality, I think, even though I defended the idea that earlier that there's somebody better out there, probably, or that there's a retrained Sanchez is better than probably someone else you'll find. At the same point, kind of the other side of the coin is that not every job's for everybody, and that's okay. You know, he's a capable guy. He's got lots of different options of where he could go. This just probably isn't the right situation for him, apparently. Otherwise, that wouldn't be happening to him twice in 2 months. So, and I think that's okay, and that's not a big deal. People go through career changes. Do you feel like I kind of want to gauge your guys. That's basically our whole discussion on this, but I wanted to get your opinion on the separate page that we read about discipline. Do you feel like there's certainly situations where that is appropriate? Do you feel like it's much better to take that side of kind of the retraining, the serious sit down, look, man, this is your chance. You blew it. You have to prove yourself this time. Do you feel like that's typically a better situation?
Better than what?
Then just jumping more to letting people go and just kind of
Oh.
believing, you know, this job isn't for you. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that like if there's not somebody's like physical safety, involved, then I think that almost any time that you can make a good effort to, to salvage a situation where you've already invested a lot in someone, I think that's the best thing to do. But there are those times when you really know that like the person isn't responding, and then I think at that point you do have to just move on, because it's a waste of everyone's time. It's just prolonging the inevitable. But as long as someone's responding and they're trying, and no, there's not a serious risk of anyone being hurt or something really serious happening, I think it's a great thing to try to turn it around.
right. What do you guys feel like was your best takeaway from this week's material and our discussion?
I don't know, I'm kind of interested in the discipline without punishment scenario.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
I don't know, it'd be great to just give somebody a paid day off and like ask them to go home and think about it. I mean, it really would, because like, I mean, sometimes it's like you just have these really challenging, ridiculous conversations, and people they get really defensive and they don't believe you. And it would be great to just be in a place like, you know what, take the day, we're going to pay you. Think this through. I mean, you don't give them 3 days, you don't give them 5 days, but you give them that day and you expect them to think it through and come back with a commitment. I really like that idea.
Yeah, I do too. The psychology behind that paid day off is pretty steep, honestly. Just like, oh crap, they don't want me there today. Like, they really don't. And
Right.
I don't know if they'll want me there when I come back.
But we're not punishing him, right? Like, it's like you go home and think about it, and then we don't have that person being really negative around all of their peers.
Yeah.
We're making an investment in them.
Sarah, Lisa, what were your takeaways from this one?
Making those kind of decisions is really, really hard. Doing what's right for the company, doing what's right for that person, doing what's right for, the safety of people. I mean, it's a really, really hard decision, and it's hard to predict their actions in the future. Like with the whole Sanchez thing, I would have expected him to step up and, say, hey, I'm actually really passionate about this, and I did get sloppy, but that was a scare that really scared me, and I'm going to refocus. That's what I would have expected from him, from what I read about him, but I got the total opposite result. I mean, he messed up again 2 months later, and so for me, it's really difficult to make those decisions. And I would actually like to study more about the other article we read. But yeah.
Along with discipline, or are you talking?
Yeah,
Yep.
the one about discipline.
discipline without punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is interesting where there's so many different work environments, how that would work with different jobs. Lisa, do you want to share any last takeaways with us and we'll end this?
So I thought after I read the article about the airport and then read the discipline without punishment, like it helped to know that there is a way to help people improve, but sometimes it might not always work. But I thought it was good. Idea to give them the chance to discipline them, and if they really wanted to change, then they would. And so, yeah, I really thought this discipline without punishment was a good
Yeah. One thing I just want to say in closing is kind of what this has made me think of as we've had this discussion is honestly the role that God has in seeking the balance between justice and mercy. Because there's so many scriptures that talk about, that his arms are always outstretched to us and that he will never really reject us. However, he expects big things of us. His expectation is perfection. And that's if we don't get there someday, then we've missed it, and it's interesting to me to think about how hard it must be for him sometimes, of what consequence is the best to inflict. But I am so confident that he has a much better perspective on what's best for us, and that's what's most important for him. But anyhow, I respect people like you, Marilyn, who have to deal with big decisions like that because it makes a big difference in people's lives sometimes. I think that's a hard place to be in.
Yeah, I'll show you this. I don't know if you guys can see my wall, but I have charity written up on my bulletin board, like where it's right above people's heads when I sit to them. Because it is really hard, to try to balance charity and mercy with other responsibilities and always feel like you're making the right decision.
Right. Well, I appreciate you all. What's that?
Do you guys want to talk doohickeys for a minute?
Sure. When is that due, by the way? Let me end the recording and then we'll
Okay.
close off.